Just wait for it to stabilise a wee bit. Okay, that looks like it's stopped going up. So, right, welcome everybody to this webinar. Martin Shepperson, Chair of Scottish Hockey, obviously. I want to thank you all for attending. We're also streaming this live, so some people might be watching it through a different medium. For those of you who are on the webinar, if you do want to speak or ask questions, please either raise a hand or put something in the chat, and we will get to you and allow you to ask questions at appropriate moments. So obviously tonight is about the membership engagement project that Scottish Hockey undertook after the last agreed to start after the last AGM, and has been running for the best part of this throughout this year. Thank you for everybody who's contributed to that. It's been very, very useful. So tonight we have the consultants who helped us with that, Ethos Consulting. I have Bruce Milroy and Claire Moore with me, and you'll see one of them shortly. Bruce is going to actually lead us through a presentation of about the project and the results. And as I say, we'll be happy to take questions at the end of that and have any sort of discussion then. So, very quick intro from me. So I'm now just going to pass over to Bruce, who will lead the next part of the evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for giving us your time and attention this evening. I'm here with my colleague Claire Moore. So Claire, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello, good evening everyone, and thanks for giving up your time this evening to join us to share this news on the engagement survey.
Thanks, Claire. I am the founding director of Ethos Consulting, a company that I set up with a colleague 21 years ago, and we have been working in the area of culture change and leadership development for all of the time that we've been in business. For about the last 6 or 7 years, we've been engaged with Sport Scotland, and through that arrangement, we've worked with around about 30 different sports in Scotland. So we're familiar with the landscape. And if you want to run through a brief timeline, back in November of, well, if you go back a little bit further, September AGM for Scottish Hockey, you did that virtual AGM with a large turnout. One of the decisions made at that AGM is that you wanted to go ahead and do a member engagement survey. Shep, along with a small team, put together a proposal which went out to tender in November. We applied to that tender or responded to that tender. We went through the competitive tender process, and we were shortlisted and allocated the contract at the end of that time. So since January, we've been engaged in 2 different methods. One was an online survey, which many of you completed, which gives us quantity of data. And the second was a number of interviews that we completed with individuals one-to-one and in confidence. And we did that during February, and then spent March doing our analysis of data, and then produced the report in early April and was presented to the board of Scottish Hockey just a couple of weeks ago. Now, one of the things that the Scottish Hockey board have done, which personally I applaud them for and think is very transparent and brave, is that they recognise that they need to be more transparent, and they've decided to publish the report in its entirety. So it's a 54-page report. And it's not being edited, it's not being cut back, you're getting to see the whole thing, and that's going to be available to you probably around about 9 o'clock tonight, immediately after this is finished, or maybe earlier than that. So I think the starting point for me then is just to share the screen and run you through a presentation which gives you the highlights of this full report, and you'll get to read the report in full if you'd like to do that later tonight. So let's start here with, this is the front page of the report. So we're talking about a reset for Scottish Hockey. That's what the brief asked us to do, was how can we look at this as a reset for Scottish Hockey? So you can see there's a Scottish Hockey member quoted on there, which is Scottish Hockey is full of passionate volunteers who dedicate their lives to Scottish Hockey and feel they have a vested interest in the sport. Hockey is their life, but they feel unheard, and Scottish Hockey couldn't run without them. So don't underestimate how emotionally attached volunteers are to the decisions that you make around Scottish Hockey. So let's start by giving you some of the stats around it. So our online survey was open for 3 weeks, and during that time we had 725 members responded to that. Of the circa 6,000 senior members that you have across Scottish Hockey, that represents about a 12% response rate. People have board asked me, is that a good response rate? And the answer is, it's not fantastic. It's a low response rate, but perhaps if your audience is a little bit disenfranchised or detached, then perhaps you might expect that. At the same time as saying it may be a low response rate, you have to recognise that you can't ignore the views of 725 people, and Scottish Hockey certainly don't intend to do that. So we had all of those responses, and then in addition to that, at the end of the survey, those of you that completed it might remember that we invited you to volunteer your email address if you wanted to take part in an interview. We had 74 people who volunteered for interview. We had space for 30 member interviews, which we expanded to 32 just to try and get a little bit extra in if we could. And what we agreed with the small working group was that we'd simply agree some principles about how to select people for interview. And those principles were an equal split of men and women, making sure that all 5 districts were represented, and that every club who had someone nominated got an interview, because larger clubs had sometimes as many as 5, 6, 7, 8 different people that they had volunteered for interview. So what that meant was that Claire and I were able to select the people for interview, so not even the Scottish Hockey Board know who we interviewed. So you can see on screen here, we interviewed 32 members, 5 district committee members, 5 professional staff from Scottish Hockey, and 3 Sports Scotland representatives. So there were 2 kind of major headline findings. One is that there's a passionate base of members and volunteers, and enormous potential to improve and grow. It's a real opportunity to reset and begin to grow the sport, and lots of the information that came from this survey supports that view. And the second thing is that Scottish Hockey as a governing body, while they perform many functions well, have lost the trust of many of its members. There's lots of evidence in this survey to suggest you've kind of lost the audience, if you like. And lots of what we are talking about and what we're recommending is about how we engage you as members and how we encourage you to gain trust back in Scottish Hockey. So the first question that we asked was, what do you think Scottish Hockey does really well as an organisation? And what you'll see here, if you have a look at them, is the top 3 results, if I can look at this, were the first one on the left-hand side, which is running international competitions and events. The second one was running national and national age group programmes. And the third one was giving opportunities to all who want to play hockey. Those were the 3 top scores in terms of things that Scottish Hockey does well. And the 3 bottom scores were allow members a say in how Scottish Hockey runs, engage our members was a low score, and raise commercial income for the benefit of hockey in Scotland. Those were the 3 low scores, and we'll address them as we go through this presentation. So there's the kind of stats if you want to look at them, and you'll see these in the full report. You'll also see in the top left-hand corner of this, it's probably worth noting, it says answered 725 and skipped 0. So this was question 1, everybody answered it. And the survey was structured in a way that said, if you would like to continue and answer questions on governance, tick here. And some people chose to skip that section. And so you'll see that the numbers vary as we go through. So that question about what does Scottish Hockey do really well, some of the key themes that came out of it about some of the great work that's already going on and things that Scottish Hockey are doing really well are these kind of things. So these things that are blue and in inverted commas are all quotes taken from either comments made in the survey or interview responses. So please keep the AGM in a virtual format. Allows people to feel like they can engage. It doesn't mean having to go to Stirling or Perth on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock when you might have childcare or other things on. And if you live in somewhere like Inverness or Dumfries, this makes it much more accessible. I Know Month, which took place in January 21, was fab. Lots of people said that. More than 200 people took part. Again, a relatively small number of people, but those that took part thought it was really well designed, really well structured, and very well presented. Our RDM is fantastic. Regional development managers came in for lots of praise in this. They make a real difference. The kind of glue that connects clubs and districts back into Scottish hockey. And Lead the Way was seen as a bit of a flagship programme. Oh my goodness, it's brilliant. And that came from people who were involved in participating in that programme. We spoke to young people in Scottish hockey who were on that programme or had been on that programme, as well as some people who were involved in the delivery of that. And then Brave was described by some people as possibly the future of hockey in Scotland. And the comment there about we should be saying, this is how Scottish hockey is going to be. This is Brave. It's brilliant. It's great. And off the back of Brave, this is our new competition structure. So lots of people said similar things about Brave, which is it was fantastic. We need to understand how we roll it out on a much larger basis. And we need a lot more detail to flesh it out and understand how to make it come alive rather than it simply being something that ends up being a really nice kind of strategy that never goes anywhere. And again, Scottish hockey are paying attention to that. So lots of good things going on, but here's the problem. The problem is an issue of trust. And if you look at this black bit in the bottom left-hand corner here, you'll see that much of the good work that is done by Scottish hockey is frequently dismissed based on members' past experiences. So one example would be members' observation that smaller clubs are closing while other clubs have reduced in size, and yet Scottish Hockey's website states that membership has grown by 90% in the last 5 years. And you can see that blue comment on the bottom right. Scottish Hockey stats show we're growing, and you have to question that. So there's a credibility issue between Scottish Hockey and its members. And it's highlighted in the fact that, people said things like, well, when I get an email from Scottish Hockey and it's got a typo in the first sentence, I'll immediately just delete it because here we go again, where it's not accurate or it's not well crafted. So there's lots of good things that go on and lots of things that are ignored or dismissed simply because you've had lots of experience of it not going well in the past. So you'll see top right, it talks about decision making. I'm sure decisions are well intended, but no one knows the reason behind them. And because of the lack of clear communication, there is an underlying distrust. And that largely sums up the views of many people. So let's have a look at an executive summary then of some of the key themes that came out of this. We were asked to look specifically in the brief at 3 areas. So they are numbered A, B, and C on here. So governance and decision-making, leadership and management, and communication and engagement. And in governance and decision-making, some of the key themes that came out of it are that Scottish hockey's role and aims are not clear. People were effectively asking the question, so what is Scottish hockey? What's it about? Is it about elite sport? Is it about participation? What's it actually about? What's it there to do? And what do I get for my money as well? Senior roles within Scottish hockey are not clear. In particular, the roles of the chair, the chief exec, and the president had some blurred lines for a lot of people, and they didn't understand and have clarity about that. Decision-making processes are not clearly understood. That's represented throughout this report, that people don't understand where they come from, why they happen, who's making them, and whether they're valid. And recruitment into Scottish Hockey's board and various committee roles is stifled by unclear expectations. And that's largely around the idea that you have an enormous number of members, all of whom who have amazing skills outside of playing hockey and could add enormous value to board and committee if they knew what was involved. And we've had examples of people saying, well, I would have gone for that role, but I wasn't exactly clear what was involved in that and how much time and commitment. In terms of leadership and management, a lack of visible leadership, Lots of comments about would like to see more of them, coming to big matches, coming to pitch openings, that kind of thing. There's a lack of clear direction on vision and strategy, and management of the basics needs attention. And that touches on things like the core system, even responding to emails, those kind of basic things that we'll touch on again as we go through this. The sport is seen as central belt focused. That idea that if you're in a relatively far-flung geography in Scotland, it might feel like Scottish hockey is quite distant and you've always got to go to the central belt to get any attention. And there is a desire for more diversity in the sport. And we'll talk about that in terms of gender equality as well as racial equality. Communication and engagement then, transparency in decision-making and communication is lacking. Transparency is a subject that came up lots in this survey, and we'll talk a bit about that. Members don't feel listened to or engaged with, and when they try to communicate, they feel like they're not heard. And communication with members could be more effective. And again, whether that's through a social media channel or a website, people had opinions about that, which weren't particularly clear, I've got to say, and we'll touch on that again when we get to it. So in terms of part one then, governance and decision-making, what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig into each of these a little bit and tell you a bit more about them. And if you have any questions, then feel free to drop them into the chat box. So let's have a look at this first part then. Scottish hockey's role and aims are not clearly understood. I think they're a bit lost as an organisation, and I don't know what they're for. Not clear on what the governing body is for and what it's trying to achieve. It's not too clear what their overall vision or intention is, what their principles are, what the values are, all that kind of strategic language, and then no one really understands the basis of their decision making. Now, if you stick with that top one about role and aims and the conversation there about overall vision or intention is unclear, the 2023 Scottish Hockey Strategy in full is available on the website, and yet most of the people that we spoke to either didn't know it was there or hadn't heard of it being referred to, and certainly hadn't read it. Senior roles within Scottish hockey are not clear. I don't know what management group's role is. It doesn't serve a purpose, and I'm not clear on the board either. Decisions aren't explained, and there's a lack of rationale, and they need to explain the why. And then this question about who makes the decisions, and that depends on the duties of professional staff. Are they there to consult, or are they there to decide? Now, one of the things that this brought up was this idea of perhaps two levels of governance, where board would have a role in governance, but management group also has some kind of role in governance, and that creates arguably two decision-making bodies, which is confusing and one of the issues that needs to be looked at and resolved. So if you have a look at this one in terms of how would you describe the current decision-making process in Scottish hockey, the two that came out highest were distant and secretive, and don't know came third with well-intended as fourth. And I think the idea of the don't know being the third highest just indicates that idea that the decision-making process is not well understood and not visible to people, and that many people, because it's not transparent to them, feel that it's distant and secretive. I think I've got the stats here again, I do. So you can see distant sits at 47.65%, with secretive at 31 being the two high scores. And then don't know is at 28% down at the bottom, with well-intended at 26%, just above that. So if we stick with decision-making for a moment, then decision-making is not well understood. All of a sudden, decisions appear, nobody knows who's involved or how that decision came to be. I know that the president, the staff, the board should make decisions, but largely it seems that generic committees seem to be making key decisions and not doing it very well. And then you've got that final comment: the management committee appears to have an influence over the professional staff, and this part of the constitutional governance, that is volunteer membership working with staff, does not work. So lots of comments and concerns about lack of clarity and lack of transparency around decision making, and we'll address that in the recommendations when we get to that. So let's have a look at people's view on who do you believe makes the key decisions at Scottish Hockey. And what you'll see here is that the board in blue is 56%. It's the high score here. And professional staff comes in, don't know is the second one actually yeah, that's about 40%. And professional staff at just marginally less than that. And you'll see that president has something like, what's that, kind of 25%, with districts, committees, clubs being a little bit lower. And if you look at the next question, which is not only who do you believe, this one's who do you believe makes the decisions now, who should make the decisions was the next question. And you'll see that the graphs change quite a bit. So board goes from 56 to 65 and continues to be the high score. However, clubs go from 6% to 56%. And the others all go up. Professional staff goes up from 38 to 42, with districts going up to 48. So what we've got here is members saying they'd like clubs, committees and districts to take on more responsibility, and they want to see the board being the leading body in terms of decision making. Continuing with decision making is not well understood. We've got some comments about governance. This governance structure of the organisation should ensure that the correct group of people are responsible for making key decisions, and that the volunteers should hold the balance of power at all levels. And there should be a clear and transparent process to allow engagement of members. We need transparency of the decision-making process to allow for accountability. And you'll keep hearing this coming up through this presentation. This idea of transparent processes and transparency is something that was a big topic. So what we really need is a simple, clear structure for decision-making. And we are suggesting that you use some kind of decision-making matrix like this. So the board make these type of decisions, then committees make these type of decisions, professional staff at this level make these kind of decisions, and so on and so forth. Now, one of the reasons that we've done this is for purposes of clarity, but also the fact that in interview, lots of people said, well, that question about who makes the decisions, surely it depends on the type of decision being made, because there are decisions to be made at club level, at district level, at board level, at committee level, all those different things. And that's all true, absolutely, but there's no reason why we can't be clear about where particular decisions sit in the kind of decision-making tree. So that's one of the recommendations that we've made. So let me just check in with Claire. How am I doing? Am I missing anything, do you think, Claire?
No, I think that's a good summary so far, Bruce. So what you're doing is highlighting some of the key points from the report, and it's worth saying for people who receive the full report at the end of the session, there is more detail to dig into behind here. And you may be thinking, what do we do about it? What are the recommendations? So towards the end of the presentation, so probably in about 15-20 minutes time, we will get to the recommendations that we're proposing, short term and long term. So yeah, I think we're on track, Bruce.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, so let's move on to part two then, in terms of leadership and management. So one of the questions that we asked was, how would you rate leadership in Scottish hockey? And you can see that it's a fairly standard bell curve. It came out as an average 4.95. Out of a score of 10. You'll see in the top left-hand corner, 596 people answered that question, 129 skipped the question. So we've still got an audience of around about 600 who've scored this question. And in terms of a lack of leadership or visible leadership, we don't really have any communication. The relationship is non-existent unless there's a crisis when they need to talk to us. I'd like Jamie or Andy or Dave to pick up the phone and ask us what's causing problems. Where are they? Where have senior leaders been since COVID-19? There are the constant own goals, there's no support and no challenge, and they seem to hide. We need strong, visible leaders who make decisions and tell us that we're valued, show us that we're valued. I shouldn't have to ask for a senior leader to come along to a new pitch opening. Now, lots of the stuff that was going on in the leadership space was around this idea of visible leadership, in that, people saying, I'm not particularly interested in looking at something that you're broadcasting on a website or a social media channel, and I don't particularly want you to respond to an email either. I'd really like to talk to you, whether that's face-to-face or have you presenting visible leadership at games and matches or pitch openings, or whether it's just doing maybe like some kind of Zoom clinic with clubs or whatever, but lots of interest in having more visibility of leaders. And when we talked about some of the improving the basics, have a look at this one, the core system, which many of you will be familiar with. Fix core once and for all. Stop telling us it's fixed, fix it or dump it. People not mincing their words around this. It would be quicker to have a baby than to sort out our club membership on core. I spoke to a club secretary from a large club who talked about in the middle of the season, they might spend 2 days a week on the core system. And people talked about it as being a system that they can see the potential in it. They recognize that if it was right, it would put you ahead of the game in terms of other sports and give you functionality that would be fantastic. It's just not right at the moment, and it's very time consuming and doesn't kind of do exactly what people would like it to do. In terms of commercial management, there's no formal strategy for sponsor fundraising. It's done through private business owners. We need a resource to market ourselves commercially. This sport can't grow by simply extracting more money from club players. Now, for any of us involved in the sporting landscape in Scotland, you'll know that lottery funding is diminished, government funding keeps getting nibbled away at, and it's really essential that sports get a little bit innovative and creative about how they go about raising their own funds and their own commercial value. And in conversation with people, they cited different sports in Scotland as exemplars, if you like. Netball was mentioned, judo was mentioned as organisations that do well in that space. And there are some recommendations around that. And in addition to improving management of the basics, people touched on things like hoping to get more response from Scottish Hockey when they do send an email. Do they get a reply, and does that come quickly enough? And another topic that came up was weekend access. When you're playing, the Scottish Hockey office is closed, so is there a way that we could maybe get some access so you could talk to someone in the event that you needed to? And we've put in a recommendation about that too. In terms of diversity and inclusion, there's a need to improve diversity and inclusion. And this comment at the top it says hockey is viewed as a posh sport when it's not. It just lacks diversity of thinking as well as diversity. And then when we get into the diversity part, they push really hard on gender equality between men and women, and that's really good. We still need more women in the sport, and it's fantastic, and we should sing about it. But if you look at ethnic minority clubs, they've been decimated over the last 10 to 15 years. We used to have 4 or 5 Asian hockey clubs in Scotland, and now there's none. Well, how did that happen? I just think they felt totally unsupported and they failed. And then we've got a really positive comment about one of the greatest things that I ever saw was I went along to Western Wildcats and I was humbled. I've never been humbled by anything so brilliant as the para hockey. And it was launched by Western Wildcats with the support of the regional development manager who had worked really hard to get that going. So more of that, please. It's brilliant. So some comments about the need for diversity and inclusion. And one of the things that we think you need to start thinking about when you get into your next strategic cycle, which happens next year in 2022, is thinking about creating a new vision and strategy beyond 2023 with clarity on the links between participation and elite sport. Many people view Scottish Hockey as being a body that is exclusively interested in one of those things, either elite or participation. That you should involve people, as in involve members, throughout 2022 in the formation of a new 2023 strategy, which would include diversity and inclusion, and that you should make sure that you have aligned your governance, your infrastructure, your processes, marketing budgets and comms, all behind that to create this, this fantastic member experience. And when you talk to other sports who have done well in this member experience space, what they'll tell you is that the conversation about, well, I pay my £40 a year and what do I get for that? That conversation goes away when people have a really fabulous experience and hear about it from colleagues and friends who've played hockey and had a great experience, because they don't they don't talk so much about how much they're paying for it. They talk about how valuable the experience is to them in their lives. And we know that many people that we spoke to talked really, really, from the heart about the idea that I just want to play hockey with my mates, and that's where I'm at my happiest and I love it. So we're going to move on and cover section 3 on communication and engagement. And this is where transparency came up a lot. On the online survey, we had 110 comments that mentioned the word transparency. The key folks in positions like chief exec, board and staff and president need to work together and show how strong leadership when difficult decisions need to be made for the good of the sport. People won't always agree, but then a compromise needs to be worked out for the good of the sport. Decisions need to be explained better or more transparently, and people really do need to leave club hats at home and not get involved in that political debate. Scottish hockey at times feel like it's been run like a hockey club, and it's not. This is a business, and as such, it needs to be run like one for the good of the sport. And board minutes are currently published around 6 or 7 weeks after a meeting. And again, we've made a recommendation about that being one of the basics to get right, about accelerating the publication and clarity of board minutes. So, how effective are the existing membership engagement practices like forums, member engagement forums? Well, what you'll see is from the left, which is I'm involved and they work, through to I've never heard of them on the right-hand side, you can see that it ramps up from left to right. So the stats on this one are 8% of members said I'm involved and they are effective. And again, if you look at top left here, 428 responses. We had 11% who said I'm involved and they're not effective. We had 37% of people saying I'm aware, but I'm not involved. And 47% saying I didn't know they existed. So if you take the yellow bar and the blue bar, that's those people that are not involved and those people who didn't know about them. That covers 84% of your audience. So lots of work to do in terms of making it available or making it known to people that these engagement forums exist, or looking at revamping those engagement forums and creating different ways that you can engage with the members. And that's all about people feeling listened to. Members don't feel listened to was one of the key themes that came out of this. We're not often asked. The views of grassroots players don't loom large for Scottish hockey. We want to be understood at grassroots level. There's a whole raft of volunteer people invisible and ignored. Forums, they'll listen, but there's no action. It comes across as decisions already made by Scottish hockey. This is, again, the idea of people just not feeling heard or listened to. Scottish hockey's lack of understanding and connectivity with amateur grassroots frustrates me, and clubs are not always kind to Scottish hockey, but that's because they haven't been listened to in the past. And that's that thing about the kind of hangover of having experienced something going on for a number of years and getting into a bit of a habit about it. Okay, so how would you like Scottish hockey to keep you informed? We'll have a look at this because it is slightly jumbled. 82% of people said they'd like to be informed by email. And yet what we know is that there is an e-newsletter that goes out, and it goes out to about 8,000 members each time it's published. And there's only about 2,500 members open it. Typically just a shade under 40% of people open it. And yet people say that they'd like to have more email from Scottish hockey. So we need to dig in and understand a bit more about that. Then you've got the website, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram going on a kind of declining slope like that. So here are some of the conflicting messages that we got about comms. On social media, we had someone say in an interview, parents don't look at Facebook, stop putting stuff on Facebook, put it on the website. And then we had a young person, a member that we spoke to, a player in a club, who said, I have all notifications turned on across all my social media channels and I feel really well informed. So there's something here about an age gap as well going on. It's a generational thing. You're dealing with an audience that goes from very young to, relatively senior in masters and still playing, and they have different requirements and different ways that they consume media. And then on the website, the view ranges enormously from, I think the website's got a good look and a good feel to it, to it's a terrible website, it's not easy to find anything. And Lots of people saying that they struggle to navigate the website, but lots of people using it as a good resource and knowing their way around it, find it relatively easy to navigate. So it needs a bit more exploration, and Paul Elliott, the comms manager, is going to be looking into this in a bit more detail, and we have some recommendations. So let's have a look at the recommendations. They're split into what we would describe as quick wins to demonstrate some progress, and then longer term recommendations, which I'll come to shortly. So this is a page from the report, but you can see that recommendation number 1 is to publish this report to all members, which we're doing right now. Number 2, clarify and publish an organisation chart, including scope and boundaries, explaining in clear terms what the board does, which committees exist, and what they're responsible for, and how to contact named members of professional staff, and published all of that to districts, clubs, and members. The third one, signpost your existing 2023 vision. Help people to understand where it is, what's included in it, talk about it all the time, and show them that it's a good document and you're working on some key strategic themes. Recommendation 4 was set a policy to publish board minutes within 7 days. Helps transparency, and no need for it to take any longer, we would argue. Recommendation 5, introduce a You Said, We Did campaign. And you're going to see that being published later on today with some dates given for regular updates on a 3-monthly basis. You said this in the survey, and we did that in terms of action. Introduce a 48-hour email response time for all queries received from members. You'll see it in the full report. Volunteers saying, even although I'm a volunteer, if I get an email, I respond within 48 hours. That doesn't happen always from Scottish Hockey, and I'd like that to happen. So that's a recommendation. Prioritise a small number of key services that you'll provide and focus attention on those things. There is an element here of you're a small organisation at its heart with a small budget and a small resource allocation, and yet you seem to be trying to do all things for all men. And that means that your resource is pretty thin. So maybe saying no to some things and prioritising and being really clear about some of the key things that you will deliver. Number 8 is acknowledge the successes and achievements within clubs. Lots of people talked about that, about rather than, love hearing about international success and national teams, but would love to hear more about innovative things that local clubs are doing as well. And then recommendation 9 was keep the AGM virtual to encourage a wide level of participation. And you already know that that's been published, that's happening. So then we move on to long-term recommendations. And I want to put a little bit of a health warning around this, because the long-term recommendations are pretty big, gnarly things that we're recommending. And I wouldn't want to get your hopes up in terms of seeing an immediate win about these things. Our experience of 20 years of doing culture changes, these things typically run on a 3 to 5 year cycle, and it takes that long to get them done. And if you think about Scottish Hockey as an organisation, it's a pretty complex beast. You've got the centre versus the national geography. You've got the elite versus the participation part. You've got the staff versus the volunteers part, and then you've got that whole structure of there's the centre, there's the districts, there's the clubs. There's a whole bunch of different kind of opportunities to have a them and us conversation. And it just needs to come together and be a bit more collaborative. And that's going to take some time. So let's have a look at the longer term recommendations. So we're talking about conducting a governance review. Now, these recommendations, there's 11 of them here. They are written in full with detail over 3 pages in the final report. And I'm just giving you a kind of précis of them here. But conduct a governance review is looking at all of that stuff around the makeup of board, the makeup of management group, the makeup of committees. Are they right? Are they the right level? Are they the right size? Have they got the right level of clarity about their responsibilities? All of that. At number 11, we're recommending to develop some decision-making principles about how we go about making decisions, what kind of decisions that we would be involved in making with that decision tree that we described, and being really crystal clear and transparent about how that works, so that people are clear about why decisions are made and where they come from and who's making them. Number 12 is develop role clarity for chair, president, and chief exec. We've already touched on that, about the blurred lines between them and the need for clarity in governance terms. And then at 13, we're talking about a suggestion that you review your company status. So Scottish Hockey is a limited company, and that may well be absolutely right. It is right for many sports in Scotland, but equally it could be that you look at the idea of becoming a Scottish charitable incorporated organisation, which gives some benefits in terms of tax and donations, and may help from a commercial point of view, and may not. But we're not giving you an answer to it because we don't know what's right for you, but we are recommending that it's reviewed and looked at. Number 14, develop an inclusive long-term vision and strategy in 22. Touched on that one again. Our recommendation is that starting next year, and it's already in the plan, that you'd be into a cycle of reviewing what do you do beyond 2023, and involving members, clubs, districts in that is something that we are recommending, an inclusive long-term vision. Number 15, create a senior leadership visibility plan and publishing it. So we're talking about roles like chair, president, chief exec, vice president, head of domestic game, head of performance, all of those kind of senior leadership roles that you should publish an annual diary that says they're going to be at these games, visiting these districts, these clubs, doing these kind of things, which allows people to say, well, if they're going to be there, I'll go and have a chat to them, and also allows them to talk about what's going on from around the world of Scottish hockey and about beyond your 2023 strategy. Reallocate resources to a professional commercial role. So we're suggesting that rather than trying to appoint a volunteer to a committee that takes on the responsibility for commerciality, that you reallocate some resource and budget within Scottish hockey, or find some money from somewhere if possible to employ someone who takes on that professional commercial role. It can't be underestimated in terms of looking at, you know, that idea of rather than perhaps people sponsoring one particular team, sponsoring the whole of Scottish hockey and doing that on a large commercial basis. There are sports in Scotland like netball that have contracted agreements with global giants like Nike. It's possible, it's definitely worth doing, and that's one of our recommendations. We're recommending that you fix the core system, and that's either taking that advice really, which is either fix the system and make it that thing that can push you into a leading edge place, or find a different way to do it, because you can't continue with a system that doesn't work, that frustrates the life out of people and leaves volunteers in a position where they feel like they're putting in lots of effort and getting no thanks for it, and sometimes being quite demoralized by it too. Number 18 is consult more with clubs and districts via Zoom or Skype or Teams or whatever platform you like. But that idea about holding meetings and clinics and any of those kind of things, seminars through online platforms, allows you to engage with a much wider geography and doesn't necessarily involve anyone having to travel anywhere, and can be really beneficial, like your AGM. Directly link the RDMs to the chief exec. So this idea is the idea that the RDMs are the eyes and ears of Scottish hockey. They're out there talking to clubs and districts all the time. They've got their finger on the pulse, and they'll get to hear stories about what's working and what's not working. So tap into that source of information back into the chief exec to say, these are the things we need to pay attention to. These are the things that our members are concerned about. Number 20, reorganise for weekend access. That's, again, we're just suggesting that it's something that's looked at. We're not saying you have to do it, but it's something that's been requested by some people, so definitely worth having a look at. And then 21 is to seek member input to improve communication channels and content. And this is the idea of Paul Elliott getting involved and doing some more work around trying to understand some of the stats that he'll have around social media, and about how many people are looking at websites and social media channels and all those kind of things, and working out something that covers the age range that you've got and the interest level that you've got, to make sure that people are feel informed and listened to and well communicated with. And at that point, I'm going to stop the sharing and say that that is the presentation done in terms of the findings. So Claire, do you want to add something?
Yeah, so thanks very much, Bruce. There's a lot of information to wade through, and thanks everyone for sticking with us and listening to all of that. I would just say, coming back to the first slide that Bruce put up, that there are two main themes in there. There's a huge amount of information, but two main themes. What we've experienced talking in the in-depth interviews is that there is a huge passion for hockey. The members, the volunteers that we've spoken to are hugely passionate and hugely interested in hockey succeeding in Scotland. As are Scottish Hockey, as are the board, and certainly that's been our experience of working with the working group as well. So the idea that trust has been lost, trust has been eroded, all of those recommendations are based around rebuilding that trust. And we see a massive opportunity to get the community of Scottish hockey behind the vision, the strategy, and to really build a growing sport that is more successful and a better member experience for everybody. That's the kind of sense we've had coming in at it from the outside and talking to the members that we've spoken to. So for everyone who did give up their time on the survey or on the interviews, thank you very much for feeding into that, because that's made it possible to create this report. Okay,
thanks very much indeed, Bruce and Claire. That was fantastic. I've just, everybody can hear this. I've really enjoyed working with you guys and appreciate the help that you've given us. And it's a very comprehensive report, and it's a very clear report. There's a lot in it. There's some tough messages, if you sit in my chair, that I have to absorb and my colleagues have to absorb. And we will do so, and we will work out how we respond. As Bruce said, there's a few things in there that are already, we're working on. Things like the AGM, keeping that virtual clearly, and other things that we're working on. So we've set up a small group, which is sort of members of the board, elected member representatives, the vice president's on there, and the board elected member representative is on there, and the staff. So the three groups working together. They've already started working through the recommendations, and will be, as Bruce said, we will be reporting back on a regular basis around that, about what we can achieve in the short term, what we can achieve in the medium term, and what will be, as Bruce said, due to the complexity of some of these things, slightly longer term. So that action plan will be coming out. You'll see some of that over the next few months, and we will, as I say, we have committed to reporting on a regular basis around that. And another opportunity about engagement, engagement. As everybody knows now that David Sweetman has left us, so we will be starting the recruitment process for a new CEO, and that will be another way that we can come out to you and ask you, what is it you think we need? We have our ideas, but we need to broaden and engage with you about that, and you'll hear more about that in the coming weeks as well. If people do want to ask questions while Bruce and Claire are here, please feel free. You can either raise a hand or put something on chat, and we will try and see who we've got.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions in, Martin, already into the Q&A.
Okay. Somebody whose name we don't actually have. To whom is it considered that professional staff should be accountable? Many of the recommendations are areas that have already been raised with the professional staff, but they seem to have been setting their own agendas. Okay, well, professional staff are accountable through the hierarchy of the staff to the chief executive, who's then accountable to me. So that's how the hierarchy currently works. If we do have genuine views that they're not responding in the right way, we have to address that. But they are accountable within the organization, but ultimately the organization is accountable to the members. So they are accountable to you, and we have to make sure that is how they feel. Bruce has very kindly already done a presentation to the staff, so the staff have heard of all this. We're not hiding it from anybody. The staff have received this, so there's tough messages for them in there. There's some very positive messages as well. The role of the RDMs was particularly highlighted by Bruce, but there's some tough messages in there, and we need to make sure that we're working together to get that right.
So, Martin, if I can just add a view to that, which is, I think that, again, in my experience, it's very common that themes come up repeatedly. And you're in a position here that since your September AGM, you have an element of new blood involved in the organisation. So you've got a new chairman in Martin, you've got a new vice president in Kaz, you've got new people appointed like Wendy Justice, and you're very, within the coming weeks and months, you will have a new chief exec. So with that kind of fresh look on it, and this catalyst taken from an external independent view, my hope would be that although the recommendations might cover areas that have been suggested before, that you'll begin to see some traction coming this time. And I would really encourage you to be quite vocal if you don't see any traction in the next 9 to 12 months.
Second question that's come up from BAMBC Hockey Club. Will this become an annual or a biannual survey so that you can benchmark and also pick themes off over the years? As like you said, Bruce, some of these things take longer. That is a distinct possibility. We haven't looked at that, but as I say, we will have regular engagement back to the members around what we are trying to do. You said we did process that we will try and follow. So, there probably will be a time where we'll want to repeat this type of survey, but we haven't yet sort of got to grips with when and how we will do that. But it's a distinct possibility. Yeah, as you say, things will change, things will develop, and we need to see what the membership think about as we do that. So yeah, distinct possibility. So those were the two Q&As that had come up. But if there are any other questions, we can, if people. Okay, another one has come up. Will the actions of the president during his tenure be held to account? Well, the president is accountable to the members and will report at the AGM. And if there are questions about the president, I'm sure those can be dealt with then. But the president is there. Their role is to represent the members and speak to the members and ensure the members' views are raised at the right level within the organisation. That's the same for the president, the vice president, and the members' elected director, to make sure that there are avenues for members' views to be heard. And we will, that is something that can be discussed. So, anybody want to ask any other further questions? Comments?
Martin, I've just had a direct contact from someone who wasn't able to dial into the webinar, but they are watching on the YouTube channel, and they just want to find out how they're going to get the report, how that's going to be circulated to people after the session.
Okay, so right after this, process finishes, Paul will be making the report available on the website, and we'll send messages out around that, where it is, the links to it. So if, tonight, tomorrow, you should be able to get onto the website and see the report. You might well get an email saying, this is where it is. So we will be, it will be made available to everybody. So we're not hiding it. It's going to be out there, and Paul will be sorting that out as of tonight. The reason why we're going to try and do it tonight is just to let everybody know that we are actually going to take part in a social media boycott over the next few days, which people might have heard about, that football have started and a lot of other sports have bought into. We're going to do that as well, all about trying to get the social media companies to take a bit more responsibility to stop online abuse of racist abuse, etc. So we've decided that we will be part of that. So we will not be updating our social media feeds over this weekend through till the end of play on Monday, the bank holiday Monday. So that's why we're going to try and get stuff out tonight, if we can.
So Martin, you've got another questions dropped into the Q&A box.
Okay. Why did David Sweetman not buy into the new process? That's a slightly unfair question. David has made a decision to leave Scottish hockey to follow other opportunities. There's an implication that he didn't buy into the new process. David has always been very open about process and things, but he after 7 years of service to Scottish hockey, he's moved on. And I don't think it's fair for me to say whether he did or didn't buy into anything. That's not really what that is about. But he's moved on, and we are now in the process of looking for a new CEO. That process started. We're going to take our time and make sure we have a sensible process around that. We'll be working clearly with our partners in Sports Scotland, getting their support into that process, and we will be doing that. And another question's come up just around that, I think, who will be the interim CEO? Effectively, that's going to be me and other members of the board working with the senior staff. We have formed a working group that will do that. So if you have questions that you think that need an answer from the CEO, please direct them to me. I will be working with other members of the board, and as I say, the senior staff, Andy Sweetman, Jamie Frail, Lloyd Samaroff, Paul Elliott, to make sure the organisation carries on and performs as it should, whilst we go through the process with Sports Scotland of looking for a new CEO. And we will be getting a lot more information about that process. Will be coming out to you. So buck stops with me at the moment. Okay. Just had a good luck message. That's quite nice. I think I'll need it. So, any other questions?
No, I don't think there's any more questions in the Q&A box or the chat box there, Martin.
Okay. Well, in that case, I will just repeat a couple of things. Say, first of all, thanks to all the members who participated in this process and have been here tonight. The numbers of people replying to the survey and the numbers of people who volunteered for interviews you've heard about, and thank you to everybody who did that. Thank you very much to Bruce and Claire, as I say, for a very comprehensive project and a very clear report. It's given us a lot to work on, which is great, and we will be doing that. So we hear the messages. We hear the very strong messages about transparency and trust. We hear those very clearly. We will, as I say, be working on this, and we will commit to keeping you informed as to how we go and what we need to do. And we will be trying to make sure that we engage as much as possible with the members, with the clubs, with the districts, with everybody who we need to do. But just reiterate Bruce's point, it's a complex organisation. We have a mixture of paid staff, volunteers at national level, volunteers at club level, players at club level, etc., etc. We want hockey to be a great experience for all, and we want Scotland to achieve punch above its weight in hockey world. The joint vision of being for the elite and for participation is very much what we as a board believe in. It's not easy to achieve, and as Bruce says, the complexity therefore does sometimes make change that bit more tricky, but we are committed to reviewing these recommendations and working out the best way of coming up with things, and we will be engaging with you as we do so. Please feel free to get in touch. As part of the communication that comes out tonight, there is an email address if you have further questions, but you should be able to contact any of the staff, any of the board level volunteers, etc., etc. if you do have questions. I'm very open to direct communication to me. If people want to do that, to talk about things, please let me know. So just again to say thank you to Bruce and Claire. Thank you for all being here tonight and your work so far and your engagement. as we go through this process. And I look forward to seeing you all, hopefully, on the hockey pitch soon, as opposed to just on Zoom. So.
Well done, Martin. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you.
Okay.